Good day, lovely people. I want to tell you a story that happened to me when I was young. When I was a child, my parents put me in a Bible camp during the summer. It's called James River Bible Camp. I would go there and play archery, do whittling, singing, and learn about the Lord. And I was too young to really understand what the whole Christian part of it was all about. However, that Bible camp was amazing to me because I got to go out there and be a boy. And the camp counselor that I had, he was stayed in our cabin. He was the counselor of that cabin. I think it was like 4 or 5 of us that were counseled by him. Unfortunately, I can't even remember his name. I was very young, but he was the first person that really encouraged me in my masculine. He really encouraged me, and he made me feel that who I was powerful and special. And we'd pray together and sang together, and he was just a very special guy to me, and he gained my heart. And a few weeks after my parents picked me up from the camp, I was riding in the van with my mother, and a motorcycle flew by on the highway, and she kind of made a bit of a noise and said, "Oh, you know, I have to tell you something that happened." And she told me that my counselor had died in a motorcycle accident. He had a head-on collision with a car and died instantly. And at the time, my mind went to full-on cognitive dissonance, like, I can't believe this. And I instantly found a story that I could tell myself that would tell me that he didn't actually die. And so what happened is what I felt was going on is my mom, she always hated motorcycles. She'd always talk about how she didn't want my dad to have motorcycles, and she was always kind of saying that stuff about motorcycles and just bad-mouthing them. And I was always a person that wanted a motorcycle, and so she would always tell me, "I don't want you to have motorcycles" and stuff. So when I heard that my counselor had died in a motorcycle accident, I told a story to myself that my mom made up the story to try to scare me away from motorcycles. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I was meditating on some things, and that counselor came to my mind, and I started to meditate on that situation, what my mom told me. And what I realized is my whole life, from that point when my mom told me that he had died, I had told myself this story to put myself into cognitive dissonance so I would never experience the trauma of losing that special person in my life. And I broke, just those 5 years ago, I broke out in tears, and I had just an amazing release of trauma. And as I've told in other videos, is I had a vision of my mother where I just floated through the floor, and I was kind of hovering over her deathbed. And I saw all the people surrounding her, and I saw her, and she was only worried about us leaving her kids behind. And instantly I forgave her. But then, right then, I didn't realize that I was even angry at her. Well, I had a lot of anger towards my mother. She was falling into this silliness about my ADHD and trying to put me on Dexedrine and all these drugs to try to make me parentable and teachable. And I knew that wasn't good for me. I remember cheeking the pills that they got me, and I was mad at my mom for not seeing who I really was and accepting me. And there was a lot of division because I was a hyperactive, crazy kid, as I am still to this day, and I drove her nuts. And all my memories, especially before she died when I was 14, was mostly me driving her crazy, and so I just was angry at her because she wasn't accepting me for who I was, and I didn't feel that loved from my mother, especially what I saw in my mind. But as I saw that vision, and I remember back to other beautiful times where she showed me her love, I could change my perception on the past, and And in that way, you are changing the past. It's like you're time traveling into your past and fixing these things that have caused waves in your life. And when I started going through all of these things, that's when it was the same period of time when I forgave my mom, is when the Bible counselor came up in my mind, and where I realized my mom was telling me the truth. And I probably held some animosity towards her for that also, that she didn't deserve. And I just think it's really important, this story, because it tells us that we need to be, when we're dealing with kids and trying to show them what has happened, we really have to make it clear and that they haven't just told themselves a story to avoid the truth. Because avoided truths and these stories we've told ourselves, they cause waves in our lives, and we need to, for us to awaken ourselves, we have to take these burdens and these false perceptions and stories we gave ourselves out of our minds. And I was talking with my father recently. We had another great conversation, and turns out he wasn't mad at me at all for recording the conversation. He was a little frustrated because he told me he didn't want to, but he didn't feel manipulated or anything like that, as my brother wrote in the messages below. And turns out my brother's just kind of continuing to try to tell his story and make sure everyone is perceiving the story how he sees it. However, the truth is coming out, and my father and I are coming close again. And that last conversation I have with him was amazing. I could see he's starting to awaken to some of these truths that I knew he was already awakened to, but he was, I think, kind of forced into going back asleep, or even maybe bullied into going back asleep so that he didn't lose, you know, my niece or things like that. But I digress. When I talked to my dad just the other day about my mom and how I was angry at her, he said to me, he's like, well, you know, she's highly open to these ideas, and she had all these friends that were saying the same things, and we have to forgive her. She knows not what she does. It's pretty much what he was saying, and that's one thing I have to know in general when we think about when Jesus says that. When Peter says, she's a woman, she's not gonna be able to come to heaven, or I can't remember the exact words, but then Jesus says, well, I will make her man so that she is ready for the kingdom of heaven. And what that means is, it's like awakening that scrutiny, that masculine spirit and the feminine, so that they aren't so easily tricked by these stories and these because they're so open, which is a strength in some ways, but that openness without scrutiny can cause you to be manipulated, and then you're through compassion, you're hurting people in your life because of following the wrong stories. And the point of that is you know, when I see that this stuff has happened, and it's even happened in other relationships, we have to forgive them and know that they just can't come to their masculine spirit. And you know, this morning, what brought this topic up in my mind this morning, I was listening to some gospel reggae music, and a song comes on. The song goes, our God is an awesome God, He lives in heaven above the earth. The power and love, our God is an awesome God. And I was just like tearing up and just crying this morning listening to these gospel songs. It was the most beautiful Holy Spirit feeling thing, and I was just blessed this morning. And that is the feminine that's awakened inside of me. It's my ability to really feel and that Holy Spirit and allow these emotions to wash over me, and that's something that I didn't always have, and I'm blessed now by the Lord that He's washes me over with the Holy Spirit like that. I never cry for any negative reasons anymore. I'm crying because of the beauty of being basking in the love of God. A lot of the trauma that divided my mom and my dad is the same stuff that I'm going through these days. When we divide the mother from the father, then we don't have the ability for the woman and the man to trust each other, so the man can scrutinize, or the masculine person in the relationship can be the one that scrutinizes, and so the feminine person can be more open, but then they have kind of a guardian over them that helps guide them in the path away from some of the things that should be scrutinized. So that's why a big part of why I make these videos is to try to awaken the feminine in the masculine, so that they are so they are respectable and trustable by women, and to awaken the masculine in the feminine so that they can understand the importance of the intense masculine energy. Because Gandhi is such an amazing guard dog, and he has no fear. He sits out on the deck, keeps his nose to the air, scrutinizes the world to make sure that we are safe inside the house. Ruby can be at peace and not be worrying about any threats, because she knows that she has Gandhi outside. And that's why we have to learn how to be dependent upon each other in a healthy way. Because, you know, there's that big movement of how people are codependent, so that's an unhealthy relationship. Well, yeah, if you're so dependent on each other that you can't hold your emotions together, you can't do any of these things, then that's going to be a problem. But to learn to depend upon the other people, or the other person in your relationship's strengths that you may not have or may not be comfortable with putting out to the world. And that's the kind of dependence I think we need more in the world. You know, when a feminist says, "I don't need a man," that is actually the dark masculine, because that is pathological use of independence. So that's what we have to realize, is when we see these feminists, this is actually a woman that is being very masculine, but not in the ways that she should be. And I want to make this very clear, and I should say it more often, is I do say man and woman sometimes to talk about the masculine and the feminine, and you know, you will be right most of the time, you know, 60-70% of the time, if you point at a man and say that he's going to be more paternal than maternal, and vice versa. So that's why, you know, sometimes it is very important to generalize, because then we can understand why men and women are not getting along. But we should also understand too that there's going to be women that are more masculine that need to find their feminine, and there's going to be men that are very feminine that need to find their masculine. So these are things that we should not be pathologizing masculinity or femininity. We should know when to use which energy, and to know that they're both inside of ourselves. And there is only two polarities of gender, and when we start to add all these other genders to it, all we're doing is confusing people from something that we still haven't got figured out yet. So it's just always been a pendulum swing from the masculine to the feminine, to the conservative to the liberal, to, you know, to my safe spaces, to the goose steps. We need to start to come to the center and know that there is a divine center between mercy and severity, from spirit and earth. Thank you all so much for listening to this talk, and let's treat children like they're adults. Let's tell them the story so clearly, and even a few times talk to them about it if they ever have a loss in their life or something like that, because we want to make it very clear that they have recognized that this is a true story, and that they haven't just found a new story to tell themselves so they didn't have to go through that trauma, because that stuff is going to sit in the unconscious, and it's going to cause pathologies to the mind and the body. And it's going to stop us from really being sensitive to the Holy Spirit. So the best way we can get connected with the Holy Spirit, to start to be guided towards understanding ourselves and understanding the Spirit and everybody else, is to do the spiritual work, to go back into the darkness in the past and try to change our perception on it, try to find out what parts of it were our own doing. And it's hard to say that about a child, but so I'm gonna try to not put that on a child really doesn't have the ability a lot of the times to make a choice. That the whole point of childhood is they're learning, and they are going to be missing more than hitting. So, but as adults, that's part of us doing our spiritual work, is to see what parts of it we were a part of. And it's as we do our spiritual work, it'll make our spiritual rest much more special. So I love you all, and God bless.